In this video, we're going to see how we can use Microsoft Excel to calculate the correlation between two economic variables. In this case, we're going to apply it to the correlation between CPI inflation and the unemployment rate. Now remember, the correlation between two variables is just equal to the covariance divided by the square root of the product of the two variances. Now, if we get a correlation equal to +1, that's equivalent to all of the observations lying on a straight line that slopes upwards. So in this example, the correlation between x and y would be equal to +1. Similarly, if you have all of the observations lying on a downward sloping straight line, then the correlation would be equal to -1. Now let's see how we can calculate the correlation using Microsoft Excel. Here we have data from the Federal Reserve economic data, looking at the unemployment rate and the CPI inflation. Now I've already prepared a scatter plot of the data so that we can see that the observations don't all lie on a straight line. And if you wanted to check that in a bit more detail in Excel, you can, with a scatter plot, right click on the data and then add a trend line. And you can see that we have a trend line passing through the data, and there's a big cloud of data around that trend line. So it looks like the correlation is going to be negative. We've got a downward sloping trend line, but it's not going to be equal to -1. It will be somewhat smaller in magnitude than that. So how do we calculate the correlation in Excel? So we can just appeal to the function equal correl. This will allow us to calculate the correlation between two arrays of data. We start off by selecting the unemployment rate, and then we do the same for the inflation rate. We select cells B2 to B241, we close our brackets, and we get a correlation equals to -0.30418. So as we predicted, our correlation is negative, but it's not close to -1 because the data doesn't lie directly on a straight line. It's also not random, so the correlation is non-zero. Now you might ask yourself, well, we've put the unemployment rate first and the inflation second. Would it matter if we did it in the opposite direction? Well, let's check that. If we now include the inflation rate as our first variable, and then use the unemployment rate as the second variable, well, we get exactly the same result. And that's because the correlation is a symmetric function. It doesn't matter which order that you put the data in, you're still going to get exactly the same result.